it was a huge catapult. So went from a design student to working for brands like Disney, and that was just like crazy. I was like, how is this real? Literally on the other side of the world, now working for these huge brands. So it was like a dream come true. But it came crashing down very quickly after about 6 months. So I lost the job and had to leave the country within 2 weeks. So
welcome to the Head Smack podcast, where we have candid conversations with misfits and mavericks, those not afraid to stand up and stand out, the dreamers and the doers, the ones who've stumbled, fumbled, and then soared. Here we delve into the inspiring journeys and pivotal aha moments that have shaped their worlds. And maybe through sharing their adventures, you'll get hit with a head smack that'll change your destiny.
Hey, welcome to the Head Smack podcast. My name is Paul Pavolny. So excited to have you come along as I talk to another misfit. And I'm so excited to have Jacob Cass with me all the way from Sydney, Australia. Jacob, how you doing, man?
thank you, Paul. I've never been called a misfit. I don't know how I feel about it. It's like,
well, let's find out how much of a misfit, because I've enjoyed calling it conversations with misfits, but I found also that it's mavericks and trailblazers and people that are standing out in their space, and you stand out definitely. I've paid attention to the stuff that you're doing. You found a way to stand out in the marketplace, in a busy marketplace of business strategists and branding strategists, and so yeah, I think you're a little bit of a misfit.
all right, I can align with standout. That's definitely very much aligned with our even slogan of our brand. We use the flamingo. That's definitely stands out. Well, stands the flock out. That's
Well, and I want to talk about that journey to the flamingo, but I want to also talk about a little bit about your origin story. You know, I'm a fan of superheroes, and I love origin stories, and I like talking to folks and finding out what theirs are. You know, right now you're a brand strategist and an educator, produce a lot of content online, and you have a lot of stuff available for folks as well. But let's talk about a little bit about, Jacob Cass, pre-brand strategist, pre-flamingo. Like, where did you get your start? And you can go as early as you want. But what was early Jacob Cass?
Well, I'd say 0 to 16 I was definitely in the creative arty world. I was always drawn to those sorts of subjects versus maths and science. So within my DNA, I was always a creative person. I believe that just because I naturally went that way. It was around when I was 16 or so, I was doing a lot of drawing and graphic design, terrible work. I cannot draw stick figures and things like that. But
the same way.
I also dabbled in, using some versions of Photoshop, early versions of Photoshop around that time as well. And that's when I heard of graphic design, but I never really knew like what that was. I was just like mixing people's faces together and morphing my friends' faces at school.
Yeah.
I did a couple of, I did a logo for a death metal band, terrible. And then I got one of my mates there knew a little bit about web design, and he kind of got me into that world as well. So it was around my teenage years when I, fell into this design kind of world. But it was only when I saw my careers advisor that I realized that was actually a career, and that you could take that path and go towards it. And that's what I did. Yeah. It was like my first head smack moment. It's like, okay, this is it. I applied to uni. Went to uni, went there for about 3 years and studied visual communication, majored in graphic design. So at my heart, I'm a creative and I'm classically trained in graphic design. So that's where my origin starts. And throughout that time studying, I started a blog. And it was called Just Creative Design back then. It's now called Just Creative. And I used that as a place to share my work, my studies, my design work. And that was just like a side project. It was just a way for me to document my studies and to share with others. Through that process, I learned about blogging. And blogging was very different to what it is today. It was very tight-knit, very small communities. It was kind of like you're definitely a nerd if you blogged. It was that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So totally different world, but that was the second aha moment or head smack moment, because it opened up my eyes to making money online through blogging and through websites. So there was a whole community around how to make money blogging. And through that, I learned SEO and a little bit more about web design as well. And it was through this process of studying graphic design, running a blog and, sharing my work that it got the attention of an agency in New York City. So I was in Sydney at the time. I hadn't had I didn't have a job. They offered me a job through Twitter. So this was when Twitter was just starting.
Yeah.
I was pretty big on Twitter at that time. I even got onto our local newspaper for being the top twit in our area.
Yeah. Now, what would you be called now? The top X? We can talk about that brand maybe in a little bit.
So yeah, it had Hugh Jackman and then me on the front page of this newspaper.
Oh,
so
nice.
Top twin.
Nice.
So that was a highlight moment. Anyway, so this agency offered the job. I got headhunted. I left Sydney 6 months later after I graduated. They waited for me, which was nice. And I packed up. I didn't have anywhere to stay. The day before I left, I found somewhere on Craigslist and flew over to New York, not knowing anyone.
Wow.
Or anything. So it was like a huge, huge leap of faith. I bloody loved it in New York. It was, big learning curve. Didn't know anyone, didn't know the culture. I spoke very fast. No one understood me back then. I've definitely slowed down.
Right.
I wasn't allowed to talk to clients. So that was
really?
Yeah.
Just as your accent?
But recently graduate. What was that? Sorry, what?
No, they didn't want you to talk to clients because of your accent. They just
they couldn't understand me. It was like right now it's like I definitely have toned it down. Most of my clients are in the US, and after living there, it's definitely toned down.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, now before you continue about the New York experience, I do want to circle back to a couple of things that you talked about. I find it fascinating that your early story is very similar to mine. In that I couldn't really draw that well, but I knew I was creative, and I knew, I loved doodling. I mean, I could draw, but not like fantastic, and like hands and faces were always a challenge, and stuff like that. And so, for me, it was, I didn't know what I wanted to do as a creative. Like, how am I going to make money doodling or being creative? Like, what exists for somebody like me? Were you kind of at that place as well? Like of what am I going to do with my life with this?
I wish I could say I was looking for that, but at that time I was really just in school and didn't really know what I wanted to do. And it was just about exploration. I did know that I loved design. So all my focus was around, like, my subjects at school was like design and tech. And, whenever I had a project, it would be like a digital project. So I knew it was something digital and I knew it was in design, but I didn't know how that worked as a career, or like even the jobs available. I'd never heard of things like creative directors or definitely not strategists.
So when did you become aware of design as a creative? Because as a young kid,
I was doing graphic design as a subject and design and tech as subjects, but they don't really tell you. They didn't really mention that that's like a career, or that you could do that for a living, and they didn't really share that. So I wish that did happen earlier, but my careers advisor, that's their job, and that's what they ask, what are you interested in? And it's like, oh, did you know this? And it's like, of course.
Yeah. For me, it was very similar to that, but I was, I'm a few years older than you, and so for me, it was a very different world when I was, coming up. And so for me as a creative kid, like, I couldn't draw. Like, I love creativity. And so I did wonder, like, what I didn't like the word design and graphic design, or it used to be called commercial art back in the day. I really didn't know what that meant and what that was all about. And so for me, it was a teacher that introduced me to design. And I'm like, oh, I don't have to be able to draw. I can use other people's drawings, or I can use other people's, imagery and photography, but I can creatively bring it all together. And for me, that was a revelation. And so, that's why I kind of wanted to see if you had a similar moment of that.
I think it came a little bit later in university of, what I did and didn't like. So the art side, I really didn't enjoy. So we had to do art as one of the compulsory subjects as the degree. And I just really didn't like showing up for it, like getting hands-on and doing, just thinking outside the box a little bit in terms of like abstract and like different mediums. I just I knew that the physical world wasn't for me. So at that moment I knew that digital was, and that's where I focused. And I loved brand. I found out that I loved typography and I loved web and digital. So it's no wonder that I kind of went in that direction and I became a UI UX designer.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was just through that exploration by them like forcing you to do certain things that you come to find what your passion is.
Right. And it's amazing how sometimes the tool appears that brings it all together as well, and it's like, the Photoshop, and I don't like working with my hands. I don't like sketching with charcoals. I don't like figure drawing. I don't like that. But the tool kind of brought about this and me are meant to be together.
Totally.
They're the right match. Yeah.
And Paul, like I drew a lot, but it was mostly copying things. It was like I'd have every single South Park character drawn on my wall and pasted up. But it was just really about, copying, and it was nothing original, but that kind of just evolved into design. And then Photoshop and Illustrator kind of just bubbled up through school and that time, and that's where I was dabbling. And I did things on the side as a hobby, like creating logos and websites, and that just evolved. A friend was working in web, and he showed me some of the things behind the scenes of Dreamweaver, and so it's like and Flash. Like there was some amazing websites built with Flash back then that were just like mind-boggling. So those are some of the tools that exposed me to the digital side of design.
Yeah, and honestly, I think even the tools for me, I don't think I could have been a designer pre-computer. I don't think my ADD.
You wouldn't have a choice.
Yeah, you wouldn't have a choice. But I think I was born in the right time, because I entered the space just as computers were becoming a part of the space. I used Quark Express, freehand. I mean, that was my toolbox. And I was in the transition time where people were still doing the bromide machines and I thought I could not have done design with that. And so
you imagine manually typesetting each little letter.
Rub down letters, man. Yeah, rub down letters. We had to do those, and
I wouldn't be a designer.
we helped. Yeah, exactly. And so I it's amazing how sometimes you could also just find your place by finding the tool that can be the catalyst for you generating the creativity and the expression that is within you. That it just works like that. And so you came at a time when that was evolving, and same with me. And so I think that's pretty amazing. And so for you, you went to uni, got a job right out of uni, off to New York. What was that like? What was that entering right into the agency space?
It was a huge catapult. So I went from a design student to working for brands like Disney, and like I had access to all of Disney's database and like those super high res files that you could like zoom in forever, just so crisp. And that was just like crazy. I was like, how is this real? Literally on the other side of the world, now working for these huge brands. So it was like a dream come true. But it came crashing down very quickly after about 6 months. So I lost the job and had to leave the country within 2 weeks. So I actually found a job within those 2 weeks, but you had to submit paperwork, and they submitted wrong twice, which meant I had to leave. So I had to go home to Australia, and I saw a lawyer and figured out some other options because I wanted to get back. And I wanted to find a different job, but I couldn't because, when you don't have a sponsor to get back in the country, you can't go over there unless you go as a tourist, but then you can't get work. Anyway,
right.
I saw a lawyer. I found out that I just happened to qualify for this certain visa that's for recent graduates within 1 year. So I went on this one visa, went back to New York, and went through about 4 different startups and agencies to find the right one. And then I found one and I stayed with them for another 4 years. So I was in New York for about 5 years, really cut my teeth into the industry, ad agency world. I worked as a UI UX designer for lots of different brands. I made a lot of websites for Nintendo, a lot of gaming websites.
Oh, wow.
So that was a really fun side of things. And Jerry Seinfeld was another big project I worked with. His show Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. So working on the branding for that and their website, and even we created a custom typeface. So throughout that time, I was also running Just Creative. So I should have mentioned this before. I was working at an ad agency in the digital sector, but at the same time, I was continuing to blog and also run my design business or freelance design business on the side.
Yeah.
So I was definitely burning the candle at both ends. I was much younger back then, working hard, playing hard in New York.
Right. You can do those late nights.
Yes, exactly. Late nights, late mornings, everything. And yeah, the point of that is that I was building up the business, and it was a slow growth for my business. I started in 2007. I still run it today, but it was over that time that I learned the industry, but built up my client base, built up my skill set, built up my portfolio. And that's when I left New York. There was an ultimatum around, well, do I go home and renew my visa for 2 years? This was after 5 years. Or do I go traveling?
Yeah.
I was a huge traveler. Like, I love travel. I was always traveling. Every moment I had, spare moment I had, I was traveling. So I left New York, didn't renew the visa. The plan was to travel for a year around Europe and a few other places. That year turned into 3 years. We went to about 88 countries, did the digital nomad thing. It was crazy.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Now, did you travel around the United States?
Yes, I did the bottom about 25 states, the southern states. Didn't get to the north too much. Did a LA to New York kind of road trip. So it was a huge.
Yeah, nice.
Yes.
And so this whole time you're still running Just Creative. Now, with the blog, had the content changed, or was the blog still pretty much the same kind of content?
It definitely changed. So early years was student work and my process. Throughout that time, it was definitely sharing my work and portfolio, but also other types of articles. Creativity, running a business, logo design was a huge focus of mine. That was my kind of niche. Yeah. And that's that's how I managed to travel. I had a great system, heavily SEO, search optimized websites. I had a lot of traffic coming in. The game's changed a lot now, but I didn't even get on phone calls for three years. Everything was through email, briefs. So it was great. And I worked 4 hours a day. That was our system, 4 hours in the morning, and then did the travel stuff in the afternoon. So it was a really great system.
The true digital nomad lifestyle. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. It literally was. So I read the 4 Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss, and that was like another like head smack moment. I was like, this is what I'm going to do. It wasn't 4 hours a week, but it was 4 hours a day. So nearly got there.
No, you had the 4 in there, so that was pretty good. That's more than most people would do. And so what's interesting about designers, and I think now maybe it's it's a little less than maybe it was in the past. The transition from being a designer to strategy, and I know you spend a lot of time in strategy now, and you have resources around it and everything. I'd love to share that at the end, how people can get some of that. But when did that transition happen for you, that went from simply designer to focusing on strategy as well? Was that always a part of how you did stuff? Yes, I think it used to be that we used to do brand strategy, but we didn't really label it brand strategy. It was kind of part of marketing, part of what we did, but we never made it a line item. When did that transition happen for you?
Yeah, so I'll explain how I did do things and how it evolved. So throughout that travel time, I had a questionnaire on the site, and I focused mainly on logos and a little bit of identity, maybe the visual identity, not the whole brand identity. And it was questionnaires, and it was basically you got the client to fill in the data. So there was no real research or thinking going into it. It's like, hey, who's your target audience? What personality should this evoke? Who are your competitors? And you'd use that data set and go and create the logo or visual identity. So that's how I did things. I didn't even get on a call. So terrible attitude. Like, in hindsight, that's so bad, and I probably lost so much business because of that, like, extended business.
But a lot of people still do that. That's the interesting thing is for a lot of immature or new, novice or new designers, that's pretty much their process still. And so I love that you're sharing that. And so continue it with how it evolved.
Yep. So that is, and I'll touch on that too. So went from the questionnaire to then learning about sales and business and talking to customers and asking them a lot of questions to get to the root cause of what they're trying to do. Why do you need a logo? Who are you trying to target? What makes you different? How are we going to position our brand? What's our message? What's our story? What are we trying to evoke here? And those sorts of questions, when you talk to them, you'll realize that most clients don't necessarily always know those answers. And that's when, something clicked. It was like, well, I need to help them with this. And then this idea of brand strategy came along, which I don't know when it was, maybe 2019 or 18. It started getting a little bit more popular, at least online. And I transitioned from doing maybe logo and visual identity work to more brand identity. So get a little bit deeper into the messaging, the storytelling, and the personality and the voice of the brand. And then a little bit later, I deep dove into brand strategy. I took like 1,000 different courses, and I loved it. And I was like, I thought I knew brand, but I didn't know shit. I was just scratching the surface on doing logos and identity, which I loved, and that was my passion, which was fine for the time. But then eventually you grow out of it. It's like, well, am I going to keep doing this forever? Like, how can I provide more value? How can I up my rates? How can I, get to the next level? And brand strategy was the way. And I was excited about that. I just talked to so many different people, learned the ropes, and I love the cross section of business, marketing, design, and problem solving, and this wide set of skills that you have to help businesses thrive. And that's my approach now. It's I get on the phone, I have hour-long conversations with my clients to understand their business, who their customer is, the category, how we should actually position them. What are we trying to, what message are we trying to send? So those are the conversations I have now, much deeper, much longer processes, much more value and greater success. So,
and for the person that fully doesn't understand what brand strategy is, in their mind, you're talking about marketing, right? Well, it's no, it's actually different. So how do you, if somebody isn't sure why they need brand strategy, they think they're doing brand strategy, but they're probably doing marketing, how would you separate the two, and how would you explain it to the client?
Yeah. Most often clients, they'll come in saying, I need a logo or I need a website. And it's like they're going through a checklist of things they need. But when you ask them certain questions about the things I just mentioned, like their customer or their category, or, even their company, like deeper questions around their company, often they draw a blank. And then you ask, well, why should a customer choose you? There's so many other options out there, and it's like just blank. So it's like, okay, well, you need some strategy here. Like, how are we going to create a logo or website if we don't know these things? And then it clicks. So you don't actually have to just say we're doing strategy. It's like you ask questions and they come to that realization themselves.
Right.
And that's how the whole sales process works, really. It's like, well, if you ask the right questions, they identify the problem, and then you can put a solution in front of them. It's like, well, you're here now and you want to get over here. This is what we have to do.
Yeah.
And that they get it. You're not selling, you're helping them get them from A to B. And that's how I see it. That's how I think about brand strategy.
Yeah. And so when they come to you and, you've had that conversation, do they ever ask you, well, how is doing brand strategy or how is doing design going to make me money? Like, why should I care about it? Do they ever ask you to pitch them or sell them?
I'll ask the question, what's the cost of not doing this?
Yeah.
So let's say we don't know all of those things. What's that going to cost you? How many lost customers are you going to have over the next X years? And then they're like, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
It's simple. It's simple.
Yeah. And so with the designer that is, they're just starting off. They realize they're creative. They realize that branding and design and doing all that is important. How would you encourage them to grow as a designer to get into a space where they provide more value for their customer?
Yeah. You don't have to be a brand strategist, but you can become more strategic. And by that, I mean, you can understand how those mechanics work, how brand strategy works, but you don't have to go into as much detail as a brand strategist. So I mentioned before about that questionnaire around, asking questions around the personality and, what they want to evoke and their client, their customers and their competitors. You can get that data, but you can do some of your own research and come up with strategic ideas of your own and run it by them without these vast, frameworks and depth that strategists go into. So I do want to make that clear. Don't be, burdened by this idea of becoming a strategist. You can do design and you can do a little bit of strategy to help inform your design process. And I do both. I do strategy to design to growth, marketing and, everything in between. So yeah, don't be intimidated by it, but you will definitely become a better designer by knowing those things. And your job will become easier because you'll have less revisions and you'll have less, back and forth with the client because you have a very strong brief and you know what you're working towards and it's based on some strategic thinking and some insights. It's going to make your designs better and less work on yourself. You could even do, move into one's concept presentations as well, which is another discussion.
Yeah. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. So the one concept approach, often, earlier in my career, I'd send like 10 logos as, here's a couple of different type of directions. And here's a couple of logos. Like, pick the best. I was like, that's terrible. Like you're the expert here. You're meant to be suggesting on what is right. If you have a strong strategic direction in the beginning that you're aligned with, now you have a very strong direction to go after. What attributes should this identity convey? What message are we trying to send here? And if you have that in writing and you agreed upon that and it's based on some insights, then your work is going to be much more dialed in. So when you present, you can share your thinking, the larger mission, the vision, the values. What is our position? How does that translate to design? So how are we bridging the gap between strategy and design? So the one concept approach, you share your thinking, based on insights with them and conversations and maybe some workshops. You share your thinking and share how it translates from strategy to design. How is it evoking this attribute?
Yeah.
And, how does that work with the logo? Why this typeface? Why this art direction? Why this illustration style? And you talk through your design decisions and how they relate back to the strategy. And it's that explanation and how it works all together as a cohesive identity and brand. That's really how you do the one concept approach. You share one logo, you share it with mock-ups, you share the whole identity and how it relates back to the brief, which basically talks to the customer. It's sending the right message that you agreed upon and so forth. So you will often, if you've done your job right, you get approval and there's low revisions after that because you've thoroughly thought about the brand holistically, not just the logo, which they will probably rubber stamp everywhere if you just share a logo. So the logo is not the brand. The clients love it, but you have to think about the brand holistically. So that's the one concept approach. And I don't do that every time. I definitely explore a lot of logos if I'm doing logo work, and I'll share a couple of different options. I use a framework called soft, hard, spiky. Basically, here's another word would be square, circle, square, or hexagon. There's different words for this, but the idea is that soft is like, soft is a circle, is rounded. It could be a more, comfortable approach. Square is a little bit more hard-edged, and it's, a little bit more off-kilter. And then spiky is definitely weird and wacky. It's the least safe option, but it's the most different, right? So if you have a safe, a middle ground, and an extreme option, then you're gonna cover the gamut, and you can actually, it's actually good for your process because it helps you think in different ways. Like, what if this was a generic brand that kind of fit in with everything? What if this was the craziest Like I was going to say mother effing brand. There it is. I'm not sure if we can swear on here, but the idea is that you can explore different options.
I love that. I love that. And when I worked in the agency world, I worked for a company called Mad Genius, and we'd do that. We'd have different options, and the final one was called the mad option. Like if we were to like really push and kind of take this in a direction that we wanted to go in and just kind of push the idea like really out there, this is what it would look like. And we'd always offer a mad option. And a lot of times the client would actually choose it because we kind of broke out of the box of where their mind was. And we created a new playground, and suddenly that became, absolutely love that. So I love both the single concept solution, and I love also that 3 with the round square spike. I love that. Absolutely awesome. And so for the, one of the things that you mentioned, and this now goes to the client side of questions, you said a logo is not a brand. So what is a brand?
What is a brand? So there's many different definitions. And I run a podcast called Just Branding, which is just focused on branding. Everyone that we have on the show, we ask this question, like, what's your definition of brand? And we've got a lot of definitions.
Yeah.
For me, probably because I hear it every single time we talk about it on that podcast, my co-host, Matt Davies, talks about it as the management of meaning. And I align with that. I also align with Marty Neumeier's definition around it being a gut feeling that someone has about your brand or product or service. Basically, you don't own your brand, but the customer does. It's formed in their mind based on all the experiences. It's the reputation of the brand as well. Jeff Bezos says it's what people say when you're not in the room.
Right.
And those are a few different definitions, but it could also be about the perception of your brand or product or service. You want to craft that perception, and that's what branding is about. You have to you have to create that meaning and create that perception. And that's done through the process of branding.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm the same way. I've heard so many different definitions, and I've wrestled with my version as well of what it might be, and it is definitely reputation. For me, your brand is what people think and feel about what you say and do. It's what that's essentially it. It's what they think or feel about what you say and do, and branding is everything you say and do. I mean, pretty much it is. Because in today's culture and in the exposure that we can get, it's pretty much everything you say and do. It's from their experience on the telephone, on your website, when they walk through the door, when they drive into your parking lot, how you smell, how you look. It's everything you say and do. It's branding in today's culture. And so, people need to be mindful of that when it comes to your brand. And so when they say, I have a brand, well, what do you have? I have a logo. It's like, you have maybe a segment of branding, but you don't have a brand yet. And so, I love what you do, and the stuff that you're sharing is super valuable. So how has your brand evolved?
How is my brand involved? What do you mean?
From just being just creative to where it's at now. Like,
did you say evolved? Is that what you said?
Evolved, yeah.
Oh, evolved. Okay. All right. So how's it evolved? So originally it was called Just Creative Design. I axed the design part, and a couple of years later bought the domain, and that's how it evolved. But I kind of mentioned this before. It went from like a logo design agency to a visual identity agency to a brand identity focused design agency, and then more recently moving into brand strategy, identity design, marketing, a few websites and so forth. I should mention that a lot of that time I was doing web design work. So in New York, I was a UX UI designer. So I was heavily involved in interactive design and digital products, but I still did a lot of branding projects with my business. So that's how it's evolved. We haven't really talked about the other arm of my business, which was the blog. That has been a huge part of my brand and business for many years. It's been the backbone of our business through getting clients and affiliate revenue. That we grew that into a 7-figure business back a few years ago, and that came crashing down. That's another head smack moment, which we can talk about.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that was, so it's Just Creative has a few arms. It's a brand design agency. It is a community. It is a platform that helps other creatives and entrepreneurs grow their brands. So there's a branding podcast attached to it. There is did I say community? There's a ton of resources on there. But it's basically split into two sections. One, the blog, which is focused for designers and creatives and techies. And then my brand design agency, which is more focused on entrepreneurs and business owners. So I serve two audiences, creatives and entrepreneurs. Sometimes they cross over, but that's my target audience. And I don't think that's necessarily changed over the years. It's been both a blessing and a curse because I have two audiences, but it's allowed me to, have my hand in different pies and do different things. And I love variety, and that's my brand. So Now, where you want to take that?
Well, you talked about the crash, so let's talk about that, and then I do have another follow-up question of in the doing your own branding is the toughest thing, and so I want to hear about how you evolved even your branding and your visuals and all that. But let's talk about the crash that happened. What was that about?
Yeah. Before I talk about the crash, I'll talk about the rise, because what it is. So the blog Just Creative it's a blog for designers and creatives. And back in around 2018, I started making some money through Amazon affiliate marketing. I dabbled in it a little bit. Like I registered my Amazon affiliate account like 2012, but for 8 years, it was like earning cents. So I didn't really know much about affiliate marketing, but I eventually had a few posts on our site get a lot of traction through search. And I was like, well, how is this post making, hundreds of dollars? Why is this? And I kind of researched and learned some of the keywords and what was making that particular post rank well and convert well. And by reverse engineering that post, I scaled up, and I'm going to hire a few writers to write similar posts and see how it works out. And it worked out. And I kept doing it. From 2018 to 2020, I hired a bunch of different writers, maybe 4 writers, and kept doing it. And then in 2020 to 22, I scaled out to about 10 people around the world, and we're pumping out at the peak probably like 20 articles a week. So it was a lot of content, and whatever we posted, like 70% of it would convert and rank well. So we had a lot of clout with Google because we had a lot of links back to our site because we had been around since 2007. So naturally our site was ranking.
And really still serving the creative community, right?
Yes, still serving the creative community. Yeah. So what affiliate marketing is, just, I didn't mention this, is if you share a link, someone clicks on the link and buys something, I get a cut of that. So I had a post, let's say best laptops for designers. Someone comes to my page, clicks on the best laptop that we recommend for, let's say, travel. They go to Amazon and buy it. I'll get like a commission, maybe like $50 from a $3,000 laptop. Yeah. So the interesting thing about Amazon is if you click a link through Amazon and they buy the laptop, but then they go and buy a diamond ring in the same purchase, you're going to get a commission on that whole cart. So you're doing this at scale. You can actually get quite a good commission from Amazon. So we did this at scale. We had hundreds, maybe thousands of articles, all different tech-related articles. And it went really well. We branched out into tech. We went into fonts. We went into like Procreate resources, everything for designers and creators, and things were ranking well. And we grew to like 1 million page views a month. And that was our output over about 2 years. We went from 200,000 a month, which is pretty good. And then 2 years later, like 1 million a month. And that didn't last too long. Google changed the algorithm, so everything came back the other way. And it was a fast and slow burn. So it's like, oh man, we lost half our visitors, and we're like, oh, that was bad. And then 3 months later they bring out another update, oh, we've lost half again. And then
oh my goodness,
6 months later they bring out another update, and they're just slowly weeding out publishers like our site from search results. And I get the reasons why. There's definitely debate around is it for the better, for the user? they're prioritizing ad revenue and certain big publishers instead of smaller publishers. We won't get into that, but the point is there was a huge rise. We was growing so well. We went up, we got to a 7-figure figure. We were going on that path, and then it came crashing down very quickly.
Wow.
Had to cut back the team and everything. And, the headspack moment here is that nothing's forever. I was heavily into search for so many years. It was the backbone of our business, and, nothing is forever. We still rank for certain phrases, but none of the, affiliate posts are anywhere near what they were. So I've had to rethink, repivot our strategy, because I had this passive income coming in, which meant I could be pretty flexible with what I worked on, and I didn't have to I could do client work, I could do just creative work, I could do side projects, and I didn't have to worry too much about the finances and all of that, because I had that layer.
Yeah, so it was called passive income, but it was kind of a primary income. Like it was your...
It definitely turned into a primary income. It's past that. And that's why I focus on it. It's like, I didn't know this, but when things are working, you dive into the data, and I just loved working with data. So I went from doing so much design to working on keywords and data diving and analytics and optimization and, plugins and speed and all back-end stuff. So it was it was a needed shift for me, because I've been doing blogging for so long, but it was just, it worked. So we doubled down on it, I guess, and then it didn't work, and then we move on. So
what would you have done differently? What would you have done differently? What would you advise somebody else?
We can't change it. So the algorithm is the algorithm, and you can try beat it. You can try reverse engineer it, and that's what we did, and it worked for a while. Now it's getting increasingly more difficult and more competitive, not just from other websites, but Google itself pushes their own products. The search result, their shopping results, and then their ads. That even if you're number one, you're not really number one. You're 5. So the chance of you being clicked, and then they have snippets and rich snippets. You're just the results are getting worse and worse, and soon they're going to bring in SGE, which is Search Generative Experience, basically AI results within Google. And that's even going to push everything further down the page. So,
wow.
Things are
definitely I'm thinking more about your business model. If you look back at the way your business model was at that point, for somebody else that might be in a similar type of place, what would you have done differently that the crash would not have been as hard for you?
Well, the crash only really affected the blogging side of it, but also it was my way of getting clients at that time. So a lot of my traffic for a lot of my leads for my agency came through search. I had a lot of articles on things like logo design or identity design, strategy, and so forth, and people would find it through that way. But how the update happened was that Google classifies your whole search as helpful or not helpful in a nutshell. And because of all those other articles, our regular rankings for other terms like brand strategy or design also went down. So we couldn't really control that. We're going through a major, prune of articles and trying to re-optimize things and yada yada. But the point is, the business model doesn't necessarily change. I still have the blog and I still have the agency. What does change is how I go about marketing. What's the strategy for getting, what are the tactics we're going to use to get clients in the door, leads, and where are we focusing? Before, I used to be able to, run a community, do design, run a side project, run a team of 10, and all of that at once. But now, because I have to actively market, I have less time, because before it was passive. I had everything organically coming in. Organically, it's no cold outreach or anything like that, no marketing. So the model hasn't changed, but how I market changed, and that affects the time as well. So those are the things that have kind of shifted in recent years.
Yeah. And so that was the reset after the crash, right? Is looking at how are leads coming in now, how are we gonna pivot, how are we gonna make sure that we have things coming in. that is maybe even not even leaning into one source as much as you did into the blogs as maybe you were before the crash. Is you were heavily leaning into that. That started off as passive, became primary in generating income as well as generating leads, and now you've diversified that into other ways instead of leaning into one direction.
Yeah.
Right?
I've always diversified. So I have digital products around, we have a typeface, we have downloads, we have the agency work, we have a community, and we have lots of different social profiles. So my eggs were definitely scattered in different baskets. So that's why I've been able to adapt. But it's the marketing side that has really been affected. So changing up where rather than search, I went more into LinkedIn, for example, this year, and focused there, and that worked. And I also reworked on my branding when it was a bit of a quieter period, like Christmas Jam. It's like naturally quieter, so I reworked my brand and refreshed it, launched that, got the attention of a few people on LinkedIn, and I got a few clients from that. So it was just like this kind of ebb and flow of our lifestyle as creatives and designers. I'm sure everyone is familiar with.
And so with your own brand, with your own visuals, you said you did a rebrand. What was that like? Where were you, and what did you either add, take away, or augment, or make better?
I wouldn't go as far as saying rebrand. It was more of a refreshed identity. So what I mean by that is we updated some of the typefaces to be bigger, bolder. We added 2 new typefaces, and we doubled down on this flamingo idea. And
where did that come from?
So pink has always been a part of our brand since 2007. It's definitely stood out in the marketplace, especially back then. There was no other, especially male graphic designer in the creative digital space, using pink. So it stood out, white and pink. The flamingo idea came probably about five years ago. I did a pro bono project for my mate's gym, and they had this huge mural on the wall of a lion. So for me, like, the project was creating like different slogans and messaging for their gym to go around the walls, like, and like the theme. So there was like the den, and there was like claw marks, and there was be fearless, be courageous, like never give up, kind of stuff, like positive messaging. And they had this theme, and I was like, man, Just Creative does not have a theme like that, and it has got no legs in terms of like theme like that. And I was like, well, what mascot or animal would represent our brand? And obviously the flamingo came up, not just because it's pink, which works perfectly, but they're bold, they're creative, they stand the fuck out, and they represent our brand spirit and of creativity and joy, and it just works so perfectly. So I shared this idea of the flamingo, and I created a poster, a Pantone pink poster of a flamingo, and I hung it up in my wall. And then I shared it on the socials, and it got the attention of a lot of other people. And whenever I was dabbling with a new project of just like experimenting with like AI or anything, I often just use a flamingo because that's what I did, and I shared that. And then I started getting gifts of like flamingo related things, or people taking me photos of like, oh, this reminded me of you. So I've got like undies and socks and shirts and like figurines and like gin, all flamingo related. And it's definitely, it's ingrained in people's heads. Like I get so many photos of like, oh, this reminded of you of when I saw the flamingo. So it worked really fucking well. That's the point. So I'm like, how do we double down on this idea? And I wanted to create a mascot that we could use, in our marketing material. And I had to find something that worked. But I went through like using stock. I tried more recently AI. Then I hired someone on Fiverr, and they're all okay. But I'm like, I don't want to really bring this up a notch. And I was just throughout this process, I was sharing this flamingo and this idea. And then someone slid into my DMs, and it's like, we do 3D mascot design. Let's have a chat. And I was like, let's see where this goes. And then I got talking to them. I shared my vision, and we created this animated mascot called Pinky. And we've just nearly finished it now. It looks really awesome. It's this like low poly style, kind of sleek digital looking flamingo. and it now animates. We have this animation of it opening its wings, which tie in with our slogan of "Dare to Flare."
Yeah.
And he's got sunglasses on, and so he's got this cool attitude. And it's really resonating with people. And we have a few taglines that go along with it, like "Stand the Flock Out," "Dare to Flare," "Flock Ordinary," and those sorts of things. So it has a lot of legs. Not just the flamingo legs, but the idea
backwards, yeah.
Yeah. The idea is there, and that sort of theme is what I was looking for, and we found it, and it's resonated really, really well. And it was a natural progression.
Yeah,
and that's what branding often is. It's like, well, things evolve. Some things come into your brand naturally. Others, fabricated, which is okay as well.
Right.
And mascots, they're very memorable. Apart from the product and perhaps the logo, mascots are the most memorable item of a brand.
Yeah, and I love that. And for the listeners, of course, we're going to have designers listening to this, as well as people that are business owners and things like that. How would you apply that head smack moment of the mascot creation? How would you apply that to the business owner that is wondering, do I need something like that? Like, why would it benefit me? Like, what would you tell them?
Why would it benefit you?
Yeah, as for a business owner.
Yeah, it's hard to say, like, if it's going to benefit you or not a mascot. So there's so many different variables. I can't say it's going to work for every business. You have to look at the pros and cons. Like, what's your category? How are other brands standing out? Are they using a mascot, or is this an opportunity here? Does it make sense for our brand? And the people I see doing it, is like they actually stand out and they're memorable.
Right.
Like there's a few people online that are using like a purple monster or like a pigeon, or even if it's a personal brand, you can become a mascot yourself. So I have another mate that he dresses in pink. He's a creative, and everything he has is pink. It's got a pink hoodie, pink beanie, pink earphones, like pink shoes. Like he becomes a mascot. So there's different ways about it, but you have to figure out, is it right for your brand? And there's a lot of different variables to consider for that.
Yeah, I love what you said there. I think there are several things there that we can highlight. Is you created, when you came up with this mascot, when you came up with this flamingo, is suddenly it gave you a language, it gave you a visual
voice,
it gave you a voice, it gave you a personality. Like it brought a lot with it that I think is valuable for a brand. If you can find a way to create, like even Liquid Death, the drink in a can, they created an attitude, they created a personality that then influenced everything that they did moving forward. And I think that's a way to build a powerful brand, is to create something that then creates the language around it, that creates the personality around it, that dictates visuals and things like that.
I will share that it generally stems from the company's soul or essence or DNA. So what do these brands actually stand for, and how are they translating this to, their message and their story? So for Liquid Death, it's, the whole idea of, the environment is there, but it's also doing things differently. It's got like a death metal vibe, and it has a certain aesthetic that stands out in the whole marketplace, and it relates back to their values and the customer as well. Like, if that people are drinking water at a concert, for example, they want to be seen as cool, and have this can, like that's a great idea, and it works. For us, for the flamingo, like it makes sense about standing out and being different in the marketplace is what we do as a service. And we get behind this idea of standing the flock out, daring to flare. And that theme kind of naturally comes from the essence of your brand. So before you get into the personality or voice of your brand, you have to consider, well, what are our values? Like, what's authentic to us? What do we believe in? And that's going to help dictate the personality and voice of your brand.
Yeah, that is so good, man. That is so good. Well, man, this has been an amazing conversation, and I appreciate you coming on. If people wanted to get a hold of you, first of all, who do you want to get a hold of you, and how can you help them, and how do they get a hold of you?
So I serve two audiences, creatives and designers, and people that want to become more strategic. I also serve business owners and help and entrepreneurs, helping them with their strategy and their branding, everything from strategy to design to growth and marketing, that's all done through me at justcreative.com. And yeah, I'm interested in connecting with anyone that wants to learn about brand, design, marketing. And I have a ton of resources on my site, as you briefly mentioned before. You can go to brandingbriefcase.com and download it all there for free. There's strategy workbooks, there's logo inspiration ebooks, there's strategic documents, there's sales calls documents to help you with your process. There's so much, like my custom GPTs that I've created for ChatGPT Plus, and
That's awesome.
it's all free in exchange for your lovely email address, and there's no spam in it. It's pure value. You'll get a lot of value in the world of branding. So yeah, that resonates. Head over to justcreative.com.
Awesome. And if you're a designer, if you're creative, I definitely recommend you follow Jacob on all the socials, everywhere he's at. Definitely provides a lot of high value. Download that briefcase. Your recent presentation for Adobe Live, I loved it. Your presentation on doing the San Francisco logo was amazing. And just even that, if you're a designer, definitely go check that out, research that out. Jacob shared the whole process of redesigning a logo or designing a logo for a city, San Francisco, and talked about that entire process. And so if you're a designer, whether you're a mature designer or a startup designer, just joining the market as a creative, definitely go look that up as well. Thank you, Jacob. This has been awesome. I appreciate you being on.
Yeah, great questions, and I love to chat about this and connect with others as well. So thank you.
Thank you for joining us on the HeadSmack podcast. We've shared some candid stories and life-changing ideas. And now it's your time to act. First, take bold action on just one idea and see how your life can radically change. Secondly, whatever platform you're listening to this on, please rate it, share it, and leave a comment. Let us know where this episode impacted you. I appreciate you giving me your time, and don't forget to join us for our next Misfit conversation.